So it's 5:20. And any citizens' concerns? Yeah. Well, we can go back. If somebody joins us, we'll ask that towards the end of the meeting. As far as minutes go, I was gone last Thursday. I did join the school committee meeting, but I was out of town. So the minutes for this meeting from last week are not finished yet. I have them here, but I haven't sent them to Joanne so she can send them out. So I'll do those with this week's meeting, and she'll have them for the next meeting. Let's see. I guess unless Jim or Michelle have anything to say before we turn it over to Tanya, I'll give you guys a chance. If not, I'll turn the meeting over to Tanya and we'll let her do her presentation.
Anybody have any questions before I get going? No? All right. No. So, we are going to, and I don't know that you guys need to make a motion or anything, but we are going to pass over the SPED and the elementary instructional assistants this week and do them at our next meeting. I had sent an update out on that based on the fact that we needed to look at some longevity updates for our instructional assistants, and there was quite a few, as well as taking a look at how the IAs and the titles coordinated. And Ariel, we just have to get together to kind of finalize a few things, and I figured it was better to wait to do that until we had it all together. So tonight is going to be elementary salaries, PVRS salaries, and the admins for both schools, and then I'll just go over the summary and kind of where I'm at with them. I will do a quick overview of the elementary salaries, and then I'm going to let the principals briefly discuss how this affects with the 6th grade move up and answer any questions that you guys might have. Okay. And I'm just using the PDFs for this because it's pretty straightforward. As you can see, we have a pretty small increase overall with the elementary salaries, which makes sense because we are moving staff over to, or the funding for staff over to the high school. And we have our contractual increases for our teachers based on the union contract. We also have a couple different things that we moved out of here. You'll see a negative in the district long-term subline. This was housed just in elementary salaries, but it really applies to the high school and the elementary. So we broke it out 60% to the elementaries, and we moved 40% over to the high school for being fair, I guess you could say, and having things where they belong for when I have to do the end of year report based on the school that the expenses happened in. And then the other thing is we moved, there were 3 nurses in this elementary school budget, 2 for Bernardston, 1 is for a 1-to-1 nurse, and then there's 1 for Northfield. That 1-to-1 nurse relates to a special ed student, so that has been moved to our special ed budget at this time. Moving on down to the teacher salaries. At Bernardston, when we updated all of our salaries with the staff that we have currently on hand, any retirements or moves that were expected, there actually is no change in FTEs. We have a second 1st grade class that's expected due to the increase in kindergarten enrollment this year, as well as a need for a second 5th grade class due to the large class size that's happening there, and it's growing right now. Northfield has a decrease in 2 FTEs. That is directly related to the 2 6th grade classrooms that will no longer be at Northfield. And there wasn't a need to add based on enrollment at that school. And then we have what used to be called our shared teacher salaries line, but we've actually renamed it to specialist because it relates to our art, music, PE, and band. And sometimes they're shared between the elementary schools and sometimes they're not. It just depends on the enrollment and fluctuations by year. So we renamed that. The one change within this particular line, you'll see an increase here is we moved the English language learner teacher from the special ed budget over to the elementary, well, partially to the elementary budget, because it's going to be needed half-time at the elementary and half-time at the high school next year. That will be a split day situation. It's not going to be a situation where they're trying to merge schedules on the same day, because that was a problem before when we were sharing specialists. So it'll be a couple days at the elementary,
Tanya,
3 days at high school.
Michelle's got her hand up.
Sure.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Am I on? Sorry.
Yeah.
There's some typos here, Tanya. If you look at the bottom, FY22 total, 2,100,106. And then if you go to the top, that's under your first slide, rather. That's under shared teachers travel.
So what happened is there's a link there, but if you look at the actual FY22 department requested, which is what rolls up to the true total, it's only the 500 for the teacher travel. So I did change that on my spreadsheet, and I can share that with you here in just a second.
Okay, I'm looking on my iPad.
Okay. That's okay.
I talked to her yesterday about that, Michelle.
Yeah. It's just the way that it was linked before because of where we had it, and I didn't catch that, so I do apologize, but I have changed it for now on my actual spreadsheet, so I do apologize about that. Going back to the specialist, the other thing that's in here besides the ELL being added, moved over from the special ed budget at a 0.5 FTE for the elementary. Currently that is that a 0.6, Megan, that we have, or a 0.4 right now at Northfield? I think it's a 0.4.
0.4 for ELL.
Right. And we have had some students move into the district with additional ELL needs at Bernardston, so that's why the increase to the 0.5. And we also have a world language teacher added to be shared between the elementary schools in this particular teacher's budget. The next spreadsheet is this shared teachers travel that Michelle was referring to, that is just $500. This has gone down significantly from FY20 because, again, I mentioned before, we were sharing a lot of teachers and specialists between the schools. Now we've decreased that to sharing band, sharing our adaptive PE teacher between Bernardston and the high school, and the music teachers are staying at the schools that they're at. What Michelle was talking about is up here where I linked it improperly, but it's the total over here that really counts. So I apologize about that. Our next one is our adjustment counselors. Those are staying the same at our elementary school. So the only increase here is just the contractual teachers union increases. We then have our substitute budget. We kept them pretty close to the same. This was based on analysis of what was used not this year or in FY20, but in FY19, and also taking into account the fact that we did increase our daily substitute rate. And you can see the decrease here from 20,000 for the district long-term sub to 12,000. And again, just a note there showing that we, excuse me, I'm going to just zoom in on this so you guys can see better, that we allocated 40% over to PVRS from this budget so that it's lined up with the school that it belongs to. Here's our nurses' salaries again, with the note that we moved one of our special ed nurses over to the special ed budget. So there's a decrease there of about $60,000. The physician salary, this is just for Ruth Potee. Last year, it wasn't equal the way that it was budgeted between the two elementary schools. This year, we straightened that out. So each school basically has 50% of that budget. And that is pretty much the elementary salaries in a nutshell. I don't know if anyone has any specific questions or wants to ask the principals some more detailed questions about the staffing.
I got just a quick question. The world language teacher, that was for the elementary schools? And that's going to be shared between the two, and that's a new position?
Yes,
okay,
that
good.
is an added position.
All right, good.
So what we do when we budget new teachers, and we spoke about this in prior budget meetings as well, is we budget for them at a step 7 master's, which basically middle of the road. That seems to be serving us well. A lot of times when we're replacing teachers, we're saving money, but we have had some situations this year, particularly where we've hired on staff and the only person we got had, 20 years experience and masters or 15 years or something along those lines. So it typically balances out, and that's the methodology that we use when we add a teacher. And the same thing with the ELL teacher, because the current person that we have filling that position at Northfield Elementary is only 0.4. So that position will be posted for a 1 FTE to be shared between the high school and the elementary. So even though the person that's in that position right now is a master step 1, we budget that at a master step 7 because we don't know whether she'll apply for that position or whether somebody else outside of the district will apply. So we've covered our bases with that as well.
Michelle, you got your hand up? Okay, carry on.
That's all I have to say. I'm just gonna show you guys real quick where I fixed my my error, because I saw it when I went through it the first time and I forgot to go back. So I have updated that from 2 million back to the 500, Michelle. Sorry about that. It happens. There's a lot of
I think you were just checking us, hey. I think you were just checking us, Tanya.
All right. If nobody has any other questions, we can move on to the high school salaries, and then we'll do the admin. I'll keep these open in case anybody has any questions or wants them to go back.
Yep.
All right, and I'm going to zoom in because this one's really tiny because we have more notes in here with the 6th grade being moved over. So again, here's our summary. This is, excuse me, you'll see a pretty significant increase in here. Some of this is our contractual increases, which is our union contract, which is 2%. The other is the teachers that are being moved up to the high school for, not necessarily moved up, but the vacant positions that will be posted for the middle school teachers. And I have some more notes in the actual teacher salaries spreadsheet that details that out a little bit more. Okay. And we also have the long-term sub line that was brought over from the elementary. In addition, we have our guidance counselors, and this is a slight increase due to needing an additional 0.5. But we actually offset that with some school choice funds, which I'll talk with you guys a little bit later. And then again, some contractual increases and an increase in not steps, but the levels for education. We have a guidance counselor that obtained a new certificate actually before this year started, but we didn't know about it until the year began. So we're budgeting for that increase as well. Nurses' salary, this is actually a small decrease. There's no change in the actual staffing with our nursing, but we're currently going to be in year 3 of a nurses grant. And each year, the amount that grant was covering for the salary increased because it was decreasing covering different expenses. So that's what that change is about. The resource officer that you see here is not a new position. It's just this was housed in our central office budget, which really the resource officer services the high school. So we just moved this from our central office over to the high school budget. So going into more details, the teacher leader, this stayed the same. We have 4 teacher leaders, and that is the stipend that's in the contract for them currently. So no change there. This is where we have all of the changes in the staff. With the 6th grade moving up, we have an increase in 6.5 FTE, and I will pull up my school choice analysis for you guys to see this non-budgeted amount that I'm looking at covering from our school choice that we've been able to build up a little bit, but we are required to spend that. We're not allowed to have it really as a reserve fund. So we have a science teacher, math teacher, social studies, and ELA. So your 4 basic subjects, obviously. an increase in art of 0.5, because not only are we bringing 6th grade up, but we don't have art at all at the middle school level right now. We've got an increase in PE teacher of 0.6. We also have that ELL teacher that I spoke about before, where we are servicing some ELL students at the high school right now. And then there's going to be move up of ELL students from the elementary that will need to be serviced there. So again, we split that 1 FTE between the elementary and high school. Our tech teacher, this was a position that was cut from 1 FTE to 0.5 last year when we were making efficiencies for savings, and we have the 6th grade moving up. So we're bringing that 6th grade class up, and we're restoring some education to some of our other students. And then the music teacher is an increase of 0.4.
Tanya, just a quick question. Well, maybe Kevin can answer.
Kevin can answer.
I get confused. Just clarify the difference between the ELL and the ELA, just so I get them straight.
I'm happy to do that. So ELA is English Language Arts. So it's basically English. Right. Those are our English teachers, where ELL is English Language Learners. It's changed from ESL to ELL. So it's had different acronyms.
All right. Well, that at least explains it, so I can distinguish the two. The other night, I get kind of tongue-tied trying to get my words out which one was which. But all right. Thanks.
Oops, sorry. I'm trying to. Give me just a second. I need to pull up my school choice analysis that I want to go over real quick. I thought it was in my documents that I already had up, so bear with me for just a second. All right, so I'm going to zoom this in because I don't think I can even see this on my screen. All right. So basically what I did in thinking about how these changes were going to affect this budget for us and for the towns, and looking at some long-term planning, I took a look at our school choice balance, not only because I needed to from when we were looking at our revenues for next year, but also because it was asked of me of our auditors when we were planning on spending that down. So we actually ended our school choice fund in June of 2020 with $454,000. I had $127,000 that I was leaving in there for a reserve to increase our offset for insurance this year, because I knew that our GIC was going to go up. So I had planned for that, and we didn't use any additional this year, except for what we were actually expecting to get conservatively in reimbursements for school choice. But our actual revenue for FY21 coming in at $536,000. Again, we were conservative with having COVID happening and not knowing what our school choice numbers were going to look like. So we're using that $440,000 we budgeted to offset our insurance this year, which is what we typically do. I've estimated our FY22 revenue at the same as FY21, simply because we typically lose a couple kids, but we also then gain some kids at our lower levels when we have smaller class sizes, and we can open a couple spots there. We've already budgeted to use $662,000 for next year. And as you can see, that's basically the 536 plus that 127 reserve that I was talking about. What that does is allows us to use the remainder of it, well, not the remainder, half of the remainder for FY22 to offset the teacher salaries for the move up of 6th grade. And then I would anticipate, as long as this revenue for FY22 is pretty spot on, it's probably going to fluctuate a little bit. We don't even know what the governor's budget's going to look like for this coming year, but we have to estimate that. I'm hoping that we can also use this, or pretty close to that $200,000 in FY23. So that will mitigate the cost to the towns of this move up, at least over the next 2 years while everyone's recovering from COVID. We can take a look at what that really looks like once they get up there. We may not need as much staff. We may not need as much supplies. Our enrollment might go up, it might go down. So it gives us a couple years to really see how it's going to affect the elementary and the high school, and hopefully do some budget right sizing, or everyone will be in a better position financially by the time FY24 comes around.
Mhm.
So that's what that is. That's what I'm proposing.
Okay.
And again, we're not really allowed to use our school choice as a reserve fund. If you have too much in there, the auditors will basically report you for having an illegal reserve, because schools aren't allowed to have reserves except for your E&D that gets voted every year. So that's where this offset comes from. And then once we get down to the guidance counselor slide, you'll see that I use the other 27,600 to offset that 0.5 increase in adjustment counselor.
Yeah.
Which is right here. So we have our contractual increases, and then that school choice, the remainder of that $200,000 that I'm proposing to use for the move up here. Guidance secretary, this is staying the same person. There is a small increase. We basically, there's extra days in that person's contract right now, but the way that I had it budgeted this particular year was that it was split between guidance and the front office, but those days are really needed in the guidance. And then we added some days to the front office administrative assistant to replace the extra days that Jen Pijak used to do when she was the other administrative assistant. So you'll see that also increased ever so slightly when we get over to the Pioneer administration budget. Moving down to substitutes, again, pretty straightforward. We kept the regular subs the same because, again, this year and last year are not good estimates, but looking back and with the increase in the daily rate, we decided to keep that the same. And we moved $8,000 of the district long-term sub over here. Sound like a broken record tonight. Nurses salary, again, we're requesting a little bit less than last year because we had some additional offsets from that grant. The salary offset went up about $4,000. Our physician salary, again, is staying the same. I don't think she's increased her contract with us for like 5 years. I haven't seen an increase since I've been here. This particular budget line, we keep in here because we are responsible to provide tutoring for students if they're out of school for any length of time for hospitalizations or anything. This used to be housed in the special ed budget and all over the place, but currently it's in the high school budget. This might be one that we might want to split between elementary and high school. I haven't actually seen it used yet since I've been here, but if we have anybody out for even a week or two and we have to provide outside tutoring for these students, we have to have some funds available to provide that for them. Our co-curricular, again, it used to be less, but we do have a contractual obligation to provide the clubs that are in the contract, and the amount that's currently in the teacher's contract is the $31,298 when you add up all the clubs and the stipends that are affiliated with each of those clubs. And here's your resource officer again, that was moved from the central office budget. And that was just, you can see an increase from FY20 to FY22. We have transferred some funds out of there, that budget this year, to cover some other things, because with schools closed and our collaboration with Northfield, we won't be using all that money this year, but we will be taking a look at what the needs are for next year and most likely be needing that full amount for the resource officer. So I'll go back up to the summary and then I'll let you guys ask some questions and Kevin can hopefully answer them for me if I don't have the answer.
I guess one of my questions, or not really a question, I guess, how do we, I guess, I don't know if John and the principals can get together and work up some kind of, I guess, a sales type document to show what we're going to be doing or adding for the program, especially for the middle school, and then what the benefits are at the elementary level, just so that parents outside the district and the parents in the district, of course, can see what the benefits are. I guess to sell ourselves, we need to sell ourselves. I mean, looking at the numbers, unless people are coming to all these meetings, I mean, they're going to be lost kind of with the numbers unless they sit down and spend a lot of time on them. So maybe separate from the numbers, maybe put something together that we can sell ourselves as a district with these changes that have been presented so far tonight and in the last couple of weeks.
I think we can do that, Mike, and then get that out so people can, even more of a visual thing where they can see it. And you said almost like a marketing brochure type thing where you have, these are the new programs coming in, or this is what's offered at the middle school. And
either that, or I can add it to our PowerPoint that we do at the public hearing as well, and have a section in there that we add on the 6th grade if you want to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, we can do it that way, but it'd be nice to maybe to end of next week, send out a flyer, or something, however you guys do your contacts with the parents, get something out to them, because the numbers are one thing, but showing the people who are actually doing and making the changes to that are improving the education, through the whole system. I mean, granted, the 6th grade is a big piece of this, but there's a lot more to the rest of the students in this district that are going to benefit with the changes that, of course, are going to cost some money. But I think Tanya's doing a good job on how this is getting put together. Yes, Michelle.
Tanya, I was wondering if you could do almost a 5-year projection if you're going to be using up school choice, because that's what I've heard. If Chapter 70 money goes down for Pioneer in the future, and we're going to use up all our school choice in 2 years, then what?
You're
on mute.
Sorry. So the school choice, I actually typed up something about this today because we had some questions on it. So the school choice is not really allowed to be used as a reserve. It's meant to be used annually in your budget as an offset to help pay for education within your district, whether it's benefits for the teachers, supplies, or the teacher salaries. So that is actually meant to be used annually, and that's how we have done it in our budget. The only reason I didn't use all of it this year is because I knew we were going to have the increase in the following year. They typically will allow you to have 1 year. So like whatever we took in FY20, they would allow us to start our FY21 year with, but it's not required. The other piece is when our E&D is certified, our E&D certification is going to be $724,000. So we are going to be using that in addition to any additional E&D that we certify, and conservatively being able to use $150,000 to $200,000 of that over the next 5 years, the way that myself and the overseer have basically worked that out, because they have to approve how much of that we use. Like I'm not just going to use all $724,000 this year so that the assessments go down, because that leaves us in a bad place moving forward. But with our conservative budgeting practices on things like revenues and special ed costs and things that have fluctuation, we're obviously not putting a whole lot of cushion, but we are being conservative with our budgeting numbers. That has allowed us to add to that E&D a little bit each year to put us in a better spot long term. What
was our E&D 3 budget seasons ago when we first started, Tanya? 0. So
when I started, the circuit breaker was negative.
Yeah.
Our school choice was just at that $120,000. And again, we basically kept that in there because we were afraid to use it, but it wasn't more than 1 year in revenue. So we didn't get kind of a slap on the hand, but that was one of the things that came up in the audit this year, was because that balance had gone up to $454,000. The reason that happened is because with COVID last year and us being able to move things around and edit our budget, we were able to put some money away to help offset the cost of transportation. So when we look at our summary for the budget and you see $189,000 increase in transportation, that true increase is only like 40,000, which is our increase in our budget. The other 150 is basically because we're not going to have $150,000 to be able to put away this year. But that is a restoral of that budget from us cutting $500,000 from the budget to help the towns with the assessments going into this year. When we're finished with this budget, the assessments to the towns, I'm anticipating, are going to be less than what they were originally projected to be for FY21 to begin with. So even though it's going to look like a 2.5% to 3% increase, probably, it's still a decrease from the prior year, and we're adding programs for the students.
Hey, Tanya, Jane Dutcher's trying to get into the meeting. Do you have, she said, she'd like to be included. So let's see, I'd have to go, I don't see her thing didn't pop up here. I just don't want to, I want to try to get her in if we can.
As I say, if she got the invite, she should be trying to get in, and it should pop up that you have someone in your waiting room.
She says, don't have Google Meet invite.
Oh, well, I can send.
If you send her that, or if you or John can send that.
You might have to, and she's on it.
Is she?
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, she needs to go to her calendar and click on the meeting.
All right, I'll tell her.
Sorry.
No, I apologize.
That's okay. So to go back to the school choice, that's basically how the school choice situation affects us as a school district.
Okay, so I understand that you've kept school choice money, but going forward,
so going forward, what will happen with the school choice?
We would be using school choice and the E&D, and I think there, to play devil's advocate, the towns could say, well, that's going to run out. And then what?
E&D, the idea with E&D is that we have, obviously we added quite a bit to it this past year because of COVID and schools being closed and whatever. But where we're at right now, we have enough to use at 150,000 over the next 4 years. And if we're adding to that a little bit each year, we're going to be able to continue to offset with E&D revenue for at least 5 or 6 years from now. The school choice, the way that it's meant to be budgeted, is that whatever your anticipated school choice funds are, that's what's used to offset that year's budget. So it's not meant to be like kept as a surplus to sustain you long term, because that would be considered a reserve that the school districts aren't really allowed to have. The only legal reserve that we're allowed to have is the reserve that the acts have required us to keep until the state tells us we can dip into those, which that will be at over 100,000 at the end of the year. So at some point they will relieve us of not being able to use those funds, and those will be available as well once they know that we're financially stable and that we're managing our funds appropriately. And then the only other one that we have is circuit breaker, which that is specifically for special ed tuitions, and you have to use those funds within the second year that you receive them. So if I receive $200,000 this year, I can't keep that for more than a year in that fund.
So it sounds like we got basically 3 funds right now. Really? I mean,
well, I was just kind of talking about some of the revolving funds. So,
yeah.
But like I said, the school choice really isn't meant to do that. And then the E&D has to be recertified each year, obviously. And then we have deciding on how much to use each year is going to be based on how much we've been able to certify. So as long as we continue to add a little bit to that each year, that will be able to be a revenue offset for us. Like I said, I'm expecting at least for the next 5 or 6 years at 150,000. We are planning to use 200 this year because the way that the state's assessing that is they're looking at, they want us to have 3% reserve, including E&D and the reserve they're making us have. So as we add to the reserve that they're requiring, the amount that they're going to allow us to use for E&D to offset our revenue will also go up. But if our E&D is dwindling, then they're going to recommend that we use less of that. You know, maybe we can use the 150. But I asked if we could use 200 this year. One, again, because the town's, you know, trying to keep the assessment increase, you know, as low as we possibly can while still doing what we need to do for the education, as well as, you know, using some of those funds that have already been contributed by the towns that, you know, helped us get to that E&D that we have right now.
Yeah. You're with us, Jane. Thanks for joining us.
So that is, that's kind of where I'm at with that. And I, you know, I wouldn't do anything that's going to put the district in a bad place because we've worked really hard over the last 3 years to get to this point. And obviously there's going to be increases. We can't not have union increases. We can't have increased costs and services. And we also have no control over, you know, the amount of special ed students that we're servicing in our district, which is one of our largest expenses. Yeah. So sorry about the dogs, guys. So if you guys are good with the high school salaries, I'm going to move on and go real quickly back to the elementary administration. This will be quick and easy. I'll zoom into these two so you can see them. Again, sorry about the dogs in the background. I have my door closed, so hopefully you can't hear them too much. This is pretty straightforward. Each school has a teacher in charge so that if the principal is out, they have a stipend. It's in the contract for what they get paid during the year to take over for the principal when they're out. We have our admin assistants at both schools. There are contractual increases for both of them because they're in the PVRSD contract. In addition, we have added 5 days to each of their work years. We're finding that those individuals are coming in over the summer on their own time to help out. And in addition, there's needs that happen over the summer for receiving of goods for the next school year. And it's hard, we can't require them to come in to check those in and get those invoices ready to process if they don't have the days in their contract to do so. Principal salaries, these is either pending negotiations or already written in a contract. What we do with all of our admin salaries, if they're not already negotiated, is they're put in at a 2% increase, which is in line with what the teachers' contracts are. The principal's travel, those have just been adjusted down to what's in the contract. We increased them last year just because the principals were driving back and forth to the high school for meetings a lot with everything happening with the school closures and all of that. But contractually, there's only 500 in each of those contracts. So that's pretty much it. I don't really think I need to go into each of the tabs because pretty much going to tell you the same thing. It just gives you the breakdown between the two schools for teacher in charge. This you can see has the increase of 5 days for each of our admin assistants that I talked about. You've got Kelly and Megan there with the salaries versus last year, and then your principal travel. Oh, the other one that's in here, but it's not a cost to the general fund budget, but for transparency purposes, again, we've talked about getting everything into the budget we can, even if it's paid for out of a different fund, is our early childhood director. And she obviously is paid out of the early childhood budget, but she is an elementary administrator technically. So I've put her in here just so that we have it for transparency reasons. Is there any questions on this particular budget?
Michelle, you got your hand up? No? Okay, thanks. No,
All right.
I'm good.
And then the same thing, we have our Pioneer administrative budget, or admin, same thing. Again, principal salary is either a contractual increase or the 2%, depending on if it's already contracted. You'll see an increase here. So here's the other piece of that 200,000 that I talked about for the school choice, is because we don't have an assistant principal right now and we're adding that to make this move possible. We talked about adding that in at 75,000 and I'm offsetting that with 17,715 from the school choice. So you basically break even between the dean of students position and the assistant principal position for this coming year. So we won't feel the impact of that increase until at least a couple of years out from now, when we're not using those funds to supplement the move up. And then there's just some changes in the days, like I said, between the two admin assistants, one decreasing because the additional days are really needed in guidance, and then the other increasing for contractual increases and the additional days needed at the high school to do the duties that are required over the summer. Anybody have any questions there?
No, I don't.
And again, the supporting documents just have the staff that are filling those positions right now, and we anticipate those to be the same for next year. It's basically Kevin, Janice, and Cheryl running the show.
Yeah.
So if you guys are good with that, again, I've been putting together a
Can I add something to that, Tanya?
Sure.
My goal is, and I know we haven't signed a contract for the assistant principal, but to have them work some summer days too within that contract.
Okay.
I don't know if that needs to be reflected in there or if that needs to be negotiated in the contract, but
I would think that would be negotiated in the contract and be part of the salary. If it needed to be additional days, then we would just need to, if the budget's already voted at the time that the contract's done, then we would just need to look to see where we can cover the funding for that when we get to that.
That's kind of what I figured, but I figured within that salary, that would be negotiated within.
Yeah. No, that would be great.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. No, that's fine. And when we get to next week's budget, I've made a couple notes for myself on a sheet like this that I have saved out on the drive. So I'll share that with you in a second when I can get back in. Any of the budgets that need, or we've found changes or efficiencies or anything like that, and we will go over those updates in the next meeting. But I kind of wanted to just give you a quick preview of what some of those are so you could see where that brings us down to. We are going to see some savings based on increase in students from Vernon that we actually saw this year, as well as right now we are waiting, and Michelle might actually have an update on this, when the meeting is supposed to happen with Hampshire Trust. They're anticipating voting a 0% increase again. And currently in this budget, we actually have a 3% increase for our premiums with them. So there's going to be a savings there as well. So let me just share this with you so you guys can.
I thought it was tomorrow, but I haven't gotten any invite. So.
Wednesday. So that's what I wasn't, I was hoping it would be today so that I could report back and say that yes, it had been voted, or no, it hadn't. So real quickly, just because, I want to just kind of keep everybody in the loop to kind of show what we're doing, but these will be represented next week once I work on them a little bit more. But based on what we're anticipating to get from regional transportation reimbursement.
Can you enlarge that, Tanya? I'm sorry. Can you enlarge it a little bit more?
I can. I was trying to show the whole.
Oh, thing. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Oops, wrong way. There we go. So this is the 332 that's in the document that you have right now, that shows all of the sections we've completed so far. I did put in the 3 budgets that are yet to be presented, just so you could see that what our total budget was for FY21, obviously in comparison where we're at right now. So some of the things that I'll be going over next week in our kind of wrap up meeting, as well as the tuition and revenues, is I'm looking at being able to offset the transportation at least 15,000. I was hoping that Jay could tell me today what the anticipated percentage reimbursement was going to be. Our transportation reimbursement rate last year was 83.9%. Looking back 6 and 7 years today, I was doing an analysis. It's been somewhere between 71 and 75%. The amount that's in our governor's budget right now for FY21 is based on 71.2%. So I'm being conservative, and that will get us 15,000 that we can use next year to offset transportation, because we did set up that regional transportation reimbursement fund that that basically allows us to put the excess we receive over our anticipated revenues into that to help us with our next year's budget. If we were to get 83.9% again this year, which is not going to happen, that would actually put us at like 100,000 over what we anticipated. But we were very conservative with our transportation reimbursement budget because I was expecting that percentage to be lower due to COVID, and I was pretty much spot on. There's not too much excess there, considering it's, a $500,000 reimbursement, but every little bit helps right now. So I just wanted to capture that. Next year's transportation reimbursement, even at that 71%, is expected to increase 33,000. Simply because we're gonna be hopefully transporting our kids longer. I did an analysis today based on what we paid the transportation company thus far, with the credits up until our return to hybrid model on Monday. So I did that and came up with a $33,000 increase in reimbursement next year. Obviously our bond proceeds go down each year 1/10 of that budget. This is our savings that I was talking about, 55,000, that I'll update the insurance budget next week once I know that they have passed that 0% increase. Our chapter 70 I'm showing as a decrease because this year they basically voted out the extra per pupil cost that we get. So our chapter 70 this year only is $20,000 less than we budgeted. And to your point, Michelle, we're in a better position for budgeting than most districts right now, because most districts have no idea what they're getting next year based on enrollment, what those percentages are going to be. It's a good time to be a base aid district because I can basically count on that same amount next year, regardless of whether or not they give us the extra $30 per student. So that makes me a little more comfortable going into voting this budget with the revenues that I'll be projecting. So I just took out the extra per pupil because we did budget that this year and they took it away. So I don't know if they'll add it back next year or not, but I'd rather be conservative. We are currently talking about, and I brought this up when we presented the facilities, I have to circle back with Kevin, but Bernardston currently only has a part-time evening custodian and a full-time daytime custodian, where Northfield has a full-time daytime and nighttime custodian. And unfortunately, the building in Bernardston, I think some of the things that we continue to see popping up over there could be mitigated by adding that halftime, or not halftime, but increasing the nighttime custodian to full-time so that you could be helping with some of not only the cleaning, but some of the maintenance items that really need to be kept up on over there. So again, further conversation with Kevin and Kelly, but this will probably be an update to the budget when we meet again next week. And the only other one is this decrease of PVRS supplies of 2,500. We briefly touched on it when we met last time, and we were going to circle back with Tyler and technology. We do have 16 of those red cats on order, so we probably won't need to budget for that for quite some time because we'll have those to be able to use in between all of our buildings. They were paid for through the RTLE grant, which was the technology grant for COVID, and we should be expecting those in soon. So Kevin, I was just proposing to take that out for this next year for the 2,500 because we'll have more than enough to go around between the buildings, and it doesn't make sense to have it in there if we're not going to need to be bumping them out. So, and again, every little bit helps. Just trying to kind of show where we're at. And I'm not going to get into huge details right now, but like I said, I'm anticipating it's going to be about a 2.5% increase based on that number. It'll probably be closer to 3 once we finish with the special ed and instructional assistants, but we decreased it 4.71. We had a negative 4.71% increase last year when we cut the $500,000 for COVID. So, looking at it in comparison to where we would have been in FY21, we probably will be a little under where we would have originally budgeted for this year. So hopefully still manageable for the towns and, adding some stuff back to the school. So I think it'll be good.
Just a follow-up question on BES. That was a second first grade class and a second fifth grade class. Okay. And do we know, are those students that are coming into the district, or is that school choice coming in, or what's the feeling on that? Or is it probably both?
I can comment if you want. The first grade class, they are students right from Bernardston, because there are our kindergartens that are coming up. We currently have 2 kindergartens due to the amount of students that we have. We did have another family or 2 come into the district. So our current numbers for next year for if we kept it as 1 kindergarten class, would be 26 students. That is too many students for a kindergarten class to be making progress, to be successful. So looking at having the 2 first grades for next year, because of our numbers right now, in first grade, we do have a lot of move-ins. Like, we commonly see move-ins at the younger grades. I am very worried about my current 4th grade numbers going into 5th grade, because we're currently at 24. So a 24 number going in with a level of high need in the classroom at this time of a year in January is concerning, knowing that we could have possible moves and be at a high number of 26 or 27 students very quickly. And again, we just had another family move in, and we have 6th grade students and 2nd grade. So we're having a flow of students. I'm also seeing a flow of students kind of both ways. Some students moving out because there's a lot of families buying homes right now. And that has been where our biggest move is everyone's getting a different home. So that's where my concern is. I could see it happening very quickly with students moving in. So just trying to think about that and being cognizant of the high classroom.
Thank you. Back to you, Tanya, if you want.
That's all I have for tonight. Like I said, I wanted to show you this, but also kind of give you a preamble to next week's meeting with some of the changes that'll be coming with some of the other sections, because this number might look a little scary. But again, just to put it in perspective, the bulk of this increase for transportation is because we were able to offset a huge portion with that money we got over our reimbursement last year, as well as the savings from not being in school last year. So about 150,000 of that number is here. We were able to make, some efficiencies elsewhere in our facilities with utilities and so forth, and in technology. So those also helped offset some of the contractual increases with the union. Just an average of 3.5% increase, because you have the 2% contractual increase. And then from step 1 to 15, there's about a 3% increase between those. And then at 15, they stop getting the increase. They only get the COLA. It's an average of 3.5% for staff. And we have $8 million in salaries. So just that alone, we need to be expecting a $250,000 increase just contractually with our union every year. So considering everything that's going into this budget, again, I'm feeling really good about where we're at and the offsets that we've been able to make because of where we've come in the last couple of years.
That looks good.
That's all I have for you guys tonight.
Okay. Diane Noble or Jane Dutcher, do you have any questions? I see you're still on with us.
I do not. This is Diana. I do not. I appreciate you sending me the invite separately. It did occur to me that I don't have a Google Calendar on the email I'm using for this, so maybe that was the issue last time.
Yeah, maybe, but we had the last 3 meetings, we had some technical, and even tonight, when I was logged in, but I wasn't seeing anybody, I had to log back off and then come back on, and then I was able to let you in, and then, so hopefully I'll talk with Kristen and John and see if there's something that's going on with the system that causes that. But if you do log in next time, just hang in there. And now whoever is running the meeting will admit you as soon as they get in, because if the meeting's on the calendar, it's definitely happening. Everybody was here except for me, but I was there. But I couldn't see anybody.
So do you post it on a separate calendar associated with the school? Is that the calendar you're talking about?
Well, the school does everything. They make me the owner of the thing, the day or two before. And then I got on early, about 15 minutes early, to make sure I was all set. But then I couldn't see anybody. And then I went off and came back on, and I could see everybody. And that's what happened to Kristen the other night during the full school committee meeting. So there's a glitch there someplace. We just got to figure out what's causing it.
Great. Well, I appreciate getting the invite so that I could log in. I didn't have that last time, so thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. Jane?
No, I have no questions, except I wonder what I missed. And I don't know what the technical problem was. I never received the invitation from Joanne this morning, which is kind of crazy. Not even in my junk mail. And I don't have a Google Calendar on the computer that has a camera. I have it on my computer that does not have a camera, but not on the one that does. So maybe if I do that, it'll help.
So she did send the invite out last week because of the holiday on Monday. So the invite went out pretty early for this meeting. So it was almost a week ago that it went out, if not earlier than that.
Yeah. All right. Well, if I don't see anybody's hand up. I think either Jim dropped out or he just left a little bit early here. So,
yeah, he usually has to go at 5:45 for his coaching, I think, over at MMH.
Yeah.
I'll move to adjourn.
All righty. We're good to go then. Thanks for showing.